Okay, so we're going to be talking about issue yield theory. And the biggest sort of overarching idea that underpins the theory is that in terms of strategic competition and strategic electoral competition, what parties should be doing is emphasising favourable issues and making those issues salient in people's minds so that they connect those issues with the party emphasising them. So a big question, of course, is what on earth are favourable issues? So there are still going to be lots of different issues to choose from in this kind of multidimensional space. So just saying kind of focusing and emphasising on issues, favourable issues, how does a party select which issues are going to be favourable to them? So the theory and the authors, Desio and Weber, and the two papers are on the reading list, essentially kind of boil this down to there being two fundamental characteristics of what makes issues favourable. So first, we're going to bring back in the idea of our valence-ometer. So of course, in order for issues to be favourable, or those that parties might want to pursue and emphasise, are going to be those that people actually care about. And so this sort of idea is about creating opportunities or maximising opportunities. So if we think about this scale as like we did in the kind of valence-ometer, but in this case we're sort of saying, well, if we start from a zero position, 0 people agree about a particular issue, and here we're kind of saying again that this is 100% of people agree on an issue. So we can think about this as the support for an issue in the general population or the general electorate. Now, while we're going to be thinking, yes, as a party, we want to maximise our opportunity in terms of getting more voters, we're kind of conditioning that to some extent on the amount of support that we've got in our existing party base. So we don't necessarily want to be putting our emphasis on every single issue that there possibly could be. We kind of want to make sure that that emphasis is in relation to where we are in terms of the vote share that we already have. So if we sort of say, for instance, that a party has about 25% of the vote, and we'll call this P for party, what we're actually saying is that we're going to be focusing on those issues to maximise our opportunity that are attractive to voters beyond our party base. So we want to focus on issues that we can kind of expand our party base. So if we call this I, and I'm just following the notation of the paper here, we kind of want to be maximising this value between sort of this IP distance here. So opportunity is one side of things, but we also need to consider the risks involved in emphasising certain issues. So we're going to be thinking about, if we emphasise a certain issue, what is that going to do to our existing party base? Is it going to alienate them? Are they going to be okay with it? So we sort of need to think about managing this opportunity in relation to the potential risks emphasising a particular issue might create for our existing party base. So essentially what we want to be doing is maximising opportunity, but sort of minimising internal division within the party. And so how do we do this, or how do we think about this? Well, there are going to be those issues in the general electorate that might be, or I don't know, they could be quite divisive. Let's take the Brexit issue as an example. So we can say roughly that 50% of the population support Brexit, 50% not. And now if there was no relationship between the support for Brexit and particular parties, then we would expect to see that same sort of distribution in support showing up regardless of what party you were a supporter of. So in the case of Brexit, if there was no association between Brexit and a party, we would expect to see that 50% of the party support Brexit. But we know that different parties actually have different types of support or different amounts of support. The distribution of support within parties is quite different from that of the general electorate. And so this is how we can think about risk. So if, for instance, we're talking about the Conservative Party, and we can say, well, actually, while we see that it's about 50-50 in the general population, around 70% of our voters, our supporters, support Brexit. We can say that the Brexit, or kind of the issue of Brexit, or the issue of EU integration, is overrepresented. Support for Brexit is overrepresented within the Conservative Party. So if we're going to be emphasising issues of that ilk, we know that the risk is actually minimal because most of our party base already support that issue. If, on the other hand, we've got an issue that gains less support within our party than it does in the electorate at large, then by emphasising that issue, we could be in trouble. We could lose some of our existing supporters. So thinking about over and under support within a party is going to be really key to thinking about issue yield theory. We can work this out pretty readily using some data. So we can say, okay, how do we work out under and over support for a particular issue within a party? Well, we can observe it. So I'm going to, again, following the notation, we can say support for an issue within a party is F. So this is the observed support within a party. And we kind of say, well, we want to maximise the differential between that support and what we would expect to see if there was no association between the issue and the party. So again, this is kind of, if we take the Brexit example, our expected value would be 50%, when actually if it's 70%, we're kind of maximising this differential, or at least emphasising issues that give greater values of this sum here. So it's not just about opportunities, but it's about risk as well. And so we're going to end up at some point with this kind of zero situation. So at this point, you do get this sort of expected value here. So this would be that there is sort of an equal distribution of people who support the issue both within and outside of the party. And so what we get is this kind of neutral position where there is no opportunity to expand the party base, because this issue, let's say this is an issue, just equals your existing party support base. And likewise, there is no risk. So this is going to be our neutral position. But once we've got this neutral position here, we can start thinking about which issues are going to be most valuable to parties, and which issues within this issue space they might want to think about emphasising, which is going to give the greatest electoral returns if they decide to emphasise the issue. Now, it's probably worth mentioning that this is just done on a party-specific basis, so we're only looking at one party's kind of strategic choices at this stage in the game. But let's run through some of the logic. So what happens, or kind of what is the logic behind a party emphasising an issue in this space? Well, this one, you can say, well, there is little risk because this is overrepresented, sort of people's support for an issue in this space is going to be overrepresented in our party. So there's little risk of losing these folks because they already like this type of issue. But we're not capturing all the voters who like this issue. There is an opportunity to expand our existing party base by emphasising an issue in this space. Quite the opposite, an issue that occupies this space, this is neither going to be attractive for the party because it risks sort of alienating or losing some of its existing members because this issue is under-supported in the party. And likewise, not enough people support it in the general electorate than we even get supporting us kind of at the moment. So there is no sort of reason why a party in a strategic sense would emphasise an issue that occupies this kind of issue space. And we can work through the logic of the other quadrants as well. So if we take, let's go here. So lots of opportunity, lots of people like this policy. However, within our party, there is a risk. There's a risk that we might lose some members because this sort of issue space is going to be under-supported within our party. So we could lose those folks. Whether it is worth the trade-off, losing those to potentially gain some extra members, is a question. Likewise, if we think about policies down here, these are going to be issues that our party likes, or there's a lot of support within our party for these types of issues already. But as far as kind of gaining new voters, you're kind of doing a lost leader situation. So there's no opportunity to expand your party base. You might just kind of strengthen or what the authors called pamper the ideologues within your existing party. So they do categorise these different positions within this issue space, and they call these bridge policies. So policies, or issues rather, within this space can act as a bridge to new voters, and there's very little risk to the party for emphasising an issue in this space because it's already got an over-represented amount of support within the party. So this is sort of like a win-win situation where we are increasing our opportunities and we're limiting the risk. This position here might seem like it's an attractive one because we've got a lot of opportunity to gain new voters, but it's a pretty risky one in terms of our existing support base. So we might be we might be risking losing some of our existing members. So these are pretty risky and what the authors call venture issues, venture policies, venture issues. These, like I said, why would a party ever choose to emphasise an issue down here? They call them dead ends. And here again, so we're saying, yes, this is going to be saying kind of pampering some of our existing party base, but they're under-supported in the general electorate, and so actually you're at risk of alienating some of your existing members, and you're not going to be getting any new members from the general electorate. So these are what we call pamper issues or pamper policies. And so within this space, we've got different issues occupying different positions within this space. And what issue yield theory sort of says is that we can kind of come up with an index which is the sum of these opportunities and risks. And so with a bit of trigonometry, we can say, what is the value of emphasising this issue compared to the value of emphasising this issue? And this is essentially the issue yield index. And the index is made up of both direction and strength, or direction and magnitude as the authors call it. So we can kind of say, if we're heading in this direction, we've got opportunity and risk, or opportunity and less risk. If we go in this direction, while we've got opportunity, we've got more risk. You can kind of think through the logic of these two positions. But the issue yield index is essentially a sum of these risks and opportunities, and we want to be maximising that sum. Why then wouldn't a party just choose to go here? These issues are basically the sort of pure valence issues that we've talked about before. So we're at this 0 point here, so support for this type of issue is neither under nor over supported within the party. So regardless of which party a voter affiliates, the distribution of support for that issue is the same. So there is no kind of partisanship in this issue. Likewise, it's super popular, so everyone wants it. It's highly supported in the general population. So why wouldn't a party just go for that? Now this, it kind of caused problems for the earlier version of the paper, and so the 2020 paper, it sort of introduces another element to cope with this question. And so the authors say, well, actually, issue yield isn't just about managing risks and opportunities. It has to be conditioned by the credibility the party has in delivering on that particular issue. So if the party goes, hey, I'm going to focus on this kind of pure valence issue, but it has no credibility in doing so, then that has to factor into the issue yield index. And so the credibility comes in not just from as a kind of internal credibility, so how credible the party or the existing party base thinks the party is in delivering on that issue, but also how credible these potential new voters think the party is in delivering on that issue. And again, I suppose empirically you can kind of elicit that from some kind of public opinion, but kind of we can think about this in more theoretical terms. So strategic issues selection is one that maximises issue yield, and issue yield is the sum of opportunities balanced against risks, conditioned by credibility. Now, pause the video for a short while, and I want you to think through the logic of a position, let's say here, because there are, of course, going to be sort of a feasible set of options available to each party, and I just want you to think about whether or not this type of position or taking a position on this issue is a feasible one.